Jake and Zara finally reached the surface after hours of walking through the crystal caves. The first thing that hit them was the smell of smoke and burned metal. The second thing was the sound of human voices shouting orders in the distance. "We made it," Jake said, feeling relief wash over him. "Those are my people." Zara squeezed his hand tighter. Now that they were close to other humans, her nervousness was returning. They ... They will be like you? Yes, Jake said confidently. They will help us. The landscape outside the caves was rough and rocky, with strange purple plants growing between the stones. In the distance, Jake could see the lights of the human settlement. It looked like a small city made of temporary buildings and landing pads for spacecraft. "It's beautiful," Zara said, looking up at the alien sky. 2 moons hung overhead, casting silver light on everything. Jake had been so focused on survival that he had forgotten to appreciate the beauty of this place. Seeing it through Zara's eyes reminded him that even in the middle of a war, there were still wonderful things to discover. They walked toward the settlement, but Jake noticed that Zara was moving more slowly. She was tired from their long journey, and her injuries were bothering her again. "Are you okay?" Jake asked. "Yes," Zara said, but Jake could see that she was trying to be brave. Jake knelt down in front of her. "Climb on my back. I'll carry you." Zara looked surprised. "You carry me? Why?" "Because that's what friends do," Jake said. "They help each other when one of them is tired." Zara climbed carefully onto Jake's back, and he stood up slowly. She was lighter than he expected, and her arms around his neck felt trusting and warm. "Thank you," Zara whispered in his ear. "You're welcome," Jake replied. As they got closer to the settlement, Jake saw human soldiers on patrol. One of them spotted Jake and Zara and called out to the others. "Sergeant Martinez," the soldier called. "We've been looking for you everywhere." Jake recognized the voice. It was Private Tony Chen, a young Marine who had joined Jake's unit 6 months ago. "Good to see you, Chun," Jake said. "Is Colonel Brooks here?" "Yes, sir," Chun replied. "She's in the command center. But Sir ... Who is that on your back?" Jake carefully helped Zara down and kept his hand on her shoulder. "This is Zara. She's a Lyrian child who got separated from her family during the battle." Chun stared at Zara with wide eyes. He had never seen a Lyrian before, and Jake could see that he was curious but also nervous. "Hello," Zara said softly, trying out her English with a new person. "She speaks English," Chun said with surprise. "A little," Jake said. "She's very smart." More soldiers gathered around them, and Jake could see a mix of reactions. Some looked curious, some looked worried, and a few looked suspicious. Jake realized that bringing an alien child into the settlement was going to cause problems. "We need to see Colonel Brooks," Jake said firmly. "Right now." Chun nodded and led them toward the command center. Jake noticed that the other soldiers were following them, whispering among themselves. Zara pressed closer to Jake's side. "Too many people," Zara whispered. "It's okay," Jake said. "They're just curious. They've never met a Lyrian before." The command center was a large temporary building filled with computers and communication equipment. Colonel Lisa Brooks was standing at a table covered with maps, talking to her officers. When she saw Jake and Zara enter, she stopped talking and stared. "Sergeant Martinez," Colonel Brooks said slowly. "I'm glad you're safe, but I need an explanation about your companion." Jake stood at attention. "Colonel, this is Zara. She's a Lyrian child who was injured during the battle. I found her alone in the caves and brought her here for medical attention." Colonel Brooks studied Zara carefully. She was a tough officer who had seen many battles, but Jake could see that the sight of the frightened alien child affected her. "Hello, Zara," Colonel Brooks said gently. "Are you hurt?" Zara looked up at Jake for encouragement. He nodded, and she took a small step forward. "I okay now," Zara said. "Jake helped me. He good person." Colonel Brooks looked impressed by Zara's English. "Where is your family?" Zara's face became sad. Lost in battle. Jake say he helped me find them. I see, Colonel Brooks said. She looked at Jake with a mixture of pride and concern. Sergeant, you know that protocol requires all alien refugees to be processed through official channels. Yes, ma'am, Jake said. But I request permission to continue caring for her personally. She's been through a lot, and she trusts me. Colonel Brooks was quiet for a moment, thinking. Jake could see that she was weighing military regulations against common sense. Jake is my friend, Zara said suddenly. He protect me from bad soldiers. He share food and water. He good human. The room fell silent. Everyone was staring at the small alien child who had just defended a human soldier. Bad soldiers? Colonel Brooks asked. What bad soldiers? Zara looked confused by the question. Jake realized that she didn't understand the difference between different human groups. She means the Vex and Khazari, Jake explained. They were the ones chasing us in the caves. Vex tell lies about humans, Zara said, her voice getting stronger. They say humans eat other people, but Jake not eat me. Jake saved me. Colonel Brooks looked shocked. They told you that humans eat other species? Yes, Zara said. All my people believe this, very scared of humans. But Jake showed me truth. Humans have families, like us. Humans help when someone hurt. Jake watched as understanding dawned on Colonel Brooks's face. She was beginning to see the bigger picture. Sergeant, Colonel Brooks said, tell me exactly what happened in those caves. Jake gave a detailed report of everything that had occurred, from finding Zara to their encounter with the wounded Vex soldier. The other officers listened in amazement as Jake described how Zara had helped convince the Vex soldier that humans were not monsters. This is incredible, Colonel Brooks said when Jake finished. Do you understand what this means? Ma'am? Jake asked. The Vex have been spreading propaganda about humans to keep other species from allying with us. But if we can prove that their stories are false, we might be able to turn the tide of this war. Zara looked confused by the military talk. What is propaganda? Colonel Brooks knelt down so she was at Zara's eye level. Propaganda is when someone tells lies to make people afraid or angry. The Vex told lies about humans to make your people afraid of us. But why? Zara asked. Why they want my people scared? Because if your people were friends with humans, the Vex would have more enemies, Colonel Brooks explained. They want to fight everyone separately, not together. Zara's eyes grew wide as she understood. So they make everyone hate humans, then everyone fight alone? That's right, Colonel Brooks said. You're very smart. Jake felt proud of Zara for understanding such a complex idea. She was not just brave and kind, but also intelligent. What we do now? Zara asked. Colonel Brooks looked at Jake and then back at Zara. First, we're going to get you proper medical care and some real food. Then we're going to try to contact your people and let them know you're safe. And Jake stay with me? Zara asked hopefully. Yes, Colonel Brooks said with a smile. Jake can stay with you. In fact, I think he should. You two make a good team. Jake felt a wave of relief. He had been worried that military protocol would force him to leave Zara in the care of strangers. Thank you, Colonel, Jake said. Don't thank me yet, Colonel Brooks replied. Taking care of an alien child is going to be complicated, but I think it's the right thing to do. A medical officer approached them. Colonel, I prepared a medical bay for the child. We should examine her injuries. Zara looked nervous about seeing another human, but Jake took her hand. It's okay, Jake said. Dr. Martinez will help you feel better. Martinez? Zara asked. Like you? Jake laughed. No, just the same name. There are many people with the same names. The medical officer, Dr. Susan Martinez, was a kind woman who had children of her own back on Earth. She examined Zara's injuries gently and was impressed by how well Jake had treated them. You did good work, Sergeant, Dr. Martinez said. Her wounds are healing nicely. Jake, very good, Doctor, Zara said proudly. Dr. Martinez smiled. Yes, He is. And you're very patient. While Dr. Martinez finished examining Zara, Colonel Brooks pulled Jake aside. Sergeant, I want you to know that what you did was extraordinary. You saved a child's life and potentially opened the door to peace with an entire species. I just did what felt right, Jake said. That's what makes you a good soldier and a good person, Colonel Brooks replied. I'm recommending you for a commendation. Jake looked over at Zara, who was laughing at something Dr. Martinez had said. She looked happy and safe for the first time since he had found her. Thank you, Colonel, Jake said. But the real reward is seeing her smile, Colonel Brooks nodded. I understand. Now, let's see if we can get her home. Jake waited until the sounds of the Khazari soldiers had completely faded before he moved. The cave system had been quiet for over an hour, and he thought it might be safe to leave their hiding place. His communicator showed that the main battle had moved to a different part of the moon, but there were still enemy patrols in the area. We need to go, Jake whispered to Zara. The battle is moving away, but we can't stay here much longer. Zara nodded and stood up slowly. Her injuries were healing well, but Jake could see that she was still sore. She had been brave about the pain, never complaining, even when it must have hurt to move. Jake helped Zara put on his jacket properly and checked to make sure she had the water bottle. He only had one nutrition bar left, but he hoped they would find other humans soon. Where we go? Zara asked in her careful English. To find my people, Jake said. They will help us get you home safely. Zara looked uncertain. Your people? They good like you? Jake smiled at her question. Yes, they're good people. Some of them have children like you at home. This seemed to reassure Zara. She took Jake's hand and squeezed it gently. I trust you. Jake felt a strong sense of responsibility. When she said those words, this small alien child was depending on him completely, and he would not let her down. They left the small chamber and began moving through the cave system. Jake knew the general direction of the human evacuation point, but the caves were like a maze. It would be easy to get lost. Jake carried his rifle in one hand and held Zara's hand with the other. She walked close beside him, trying to match his pace. Her rabbit-like ears moved constantly, listening for any signs of danger. The blue crystals continued to light their way, but Jake noticed that they were getting dimmer in some areas. He wondered if the battle had damaged the crystal formations. Somehow. Jake, Zara said softly, tell me about your home. Jake was surprised by the question. He had not expected her to be curious about his life. My home is called Earth, Jake said. It's a planet with blue skies and green grass. There are many animals there, and the air smells like flowers in the spring. Zara's eyes lit up with interest. Animals? What animals? Jake thought about how to describe Earth's animals to someone who had never seen them. There are birds that fly in the sky and sing beautiful songs. There are furry animals called cats and dogs that live with humans as friends. Like pets? Zara asked. Yes, like pets. But they're also family members. We love them and take care of them. Zara seemed fascinated by this idea. Humans have animal friends? Yes, many humans do. I had a dog named Buddy when I was young. He was my best friend. Jake told Zara about his childhood on his family's farm while they walked. He described the cornfields, the old red barn, and the creek where he used to catch fish. Zara listened carefully to every word, asking questions when she didn't understand something. Your family, they farmers? Zara asked. Yes, my parents grow food. Corn, wheat, vegetables. They feed many people. Like my family, Zara said with a sad smile. We grow singing flowers. Very beautiful. Make music when wind blows. Jake was touched that Zara was sharing something about her own family. That sounds wonderful. I would like to see singing flowers someday. Maybe you can, Zara said hopefully, when we find my family. They continued walking through the caves, following passages that seemed to lead upward toward the surface. Jake hoped they were going in the right direction, but he had to admit he was not entirely sure. "Jake," Zara said after they had been walking for a while, "why Vex say bad things about humans?" Jake had been dreading this question, but he knew. He had to answer it honestly. The Vex want to control other species. If they can make everyone afraid of humans, then no one will want to be friends with us. "But why?" Zara asked. "Why they want control?" "Because they think they're better than everyone else," Jake said. "They don't understand that different species can work together and help each other." Zara was quiet for a moment, thinking about this. "My people ... we believe Vex stories. We very scared of humans." "I know," Jake said gently. "But now you know the truth. Humans want to be friends with peaceful people like the Lyrians." "I tell my family," Zara said firmly. "I tell them humans are good." Jake smiled at her determination. This brave little girl was going to help change the relationship between their species. They came to a place where the passage split into 3 different directions. Jake stopped and tried to figure out which way to go. His communicator showed that the evacuation point was somewhere to the north, but the caves made it hard to tell directions. "Which way?" Zara asked. Jake studied the 3 passages carefully. One led upward, one stayed level, and one went downward. He decided that up was probably the best choice. "This way," Jake said, pointing to the upward passage. They had only been walking for a few minutes when they heard a sound that made them both freeze. It was a voice, but not human, Vex, or Kazari. It was weak and calling for help. "Someone hurt," Zara whispered. Jake nodded and moved carefully toward the sound. He kept his rifle ready, but he was prepared to help if someone needed it. They found a wounded Vex soldier lying beside a pile of rocks. He had been hit by plasma fire and was badly injured. When he saw Jake and Zara, his eyes filled with hatred. "Human!" "Monster," the Vex soldier said in broken English. "You ... You eat the small one." Jake felt angry at the accusation, but he also felt sorry for the injured soldier. "I'm not going to hurt anyone," Jake said. "Do you need medical help?" The Vex soldier looked confused. This was not what he expected from a human. "I help," Jake said, reaching for his medical kit. "No," the Vex soldier said weakly. "Humans ... evil. You tricked me." Zara stepped forward and spoke to the Vex soldier in a language that Jake didn't recognize. The soldier's eyes widened in surprise when he heard her voice. "What did you say?" Jake asked. "I told him you saved me," Zara said. "I told him you are. Good person, not monster." The Vex soldier stared at Zara with disbelief. "Impossible. Humans eat other species. Everyone knows this." "No," Zara said firmly. "This human give me food. This human protect me. This human has family, like us." The Vex soldier looked back and forth between Jake and Zara. He was clearly struggling to understand what he was seeing. Jake slowly approached the wounded soldier. "Let me help you," he said. "Your injuries are serious." The Vex soldier was too weak to resist. Jake carefully examined his wounds and began applying bandages. The soldier watched Jake's face the whole time, looking for signs of cruelty or deception. "Why you help me?" the Vex soldier asked. "I am your enemy." "Because you're hurt," Jake said simply. "And because it's the right thing to do." The Vex soldier was quiet for a long time. Jake finished bandaging his wounds and gave him some water from his emergency supply. "You not what I expected," the Vex soldier said finally. "None of us are what you expected," Jake replied. "Humans, Lyrians, even some Vex. We're all just people trying to survive." The Vex soldier looked at Zara again. "Small one, you really not afraid of human?" "I was afraid," Zara said honestly. "But Jake showed me truth. Humans not monsters. They have good hearts." The Vex soldier closed his eyes and seemed to be thinking. When he opened them again, he looked directly at Jake. I sorry," the soldier said. "We told wrong things about humans. I see now. Maybe we wrong about many things." Jake felt a spark of hope. If one Vex soldier could change his mind about humans, maybe others could too. It's okay, Jake said. We all make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them. The Vex soldier nodded weakly. You go now. Other Vex soldiers still believe old stories. They will try to hurt you. What about you? Jake asked. We can't leave you here alone. I will be fine, the soldier said. My people will find me. But you must go to safety. Jake stood up and helped Zara to her feet. The encounter with the Vex soldier had been unexpected, but it had shown him something important. Change was possible, even in the middle of a war. Thank you, the Vex soldier said as they prepared to leave. Thank you for showing me truth. Jake nodded and led Zara away from the wounded soldier. They continued up the passage, but now Jake felt different about their mission. They were not just trying to survive anymore. They were proving that different species could understand each other and work together. That was a good thing you did, Zara said as they walked. We did it together, Jake replied. You helped him understand. Zara smiled and squeezed Jake's hand. We good team. Jake squeezed back. Yes, we are. Jake watched Zara sleep against his shoulder for what felt like hours. The sounds of battle had grown distant, but he could still hear occasional explosions echoing through the cave system. His rifle lay across his lap, ready to use it to Vex. Warriors returned. Zara's breathing was soft and steady, and Jake could feel the warmth of her small body through his jacket. She had stopped shivering, which was a good sign. Jake had seen enough injured people to know that shock and cold could be dangerous. The blue crystals in the cave walls continued to glow softly, creating patterns of light that moved like water. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful, but he could not enjoy it while they were in danger. Zara stirred in her sleep and mumbled something in her musical language. Jake could not understand the words, but she sounded distressed. He wondered if she was having nightmares about the battle or about him. It's okay, Jake whispered softly. You're safe. Zara's eyes opened slowly, and she looked up at Jake with confusion. For a moment, she seemed to forget where she was. Then she remembered and tensed up slightly. Did you sleep well? Jake asked gently. Zara sat up and rubbed her eyes. She looked around the chamber as if she was checking to make sure they were still hidden. Jake was impressed by how quickly she became alert. Are you hungry? Jake asked, reaching for another nutrition bar. Zara shook her head, but Jake could hear her stomach growling. She was trying to be polite, but she needed food. It's okay, Jake said, breaking off a piece of the nutrition bar. I have plenty. This was not true. Jake only had 2 more nutrition bars left, and he did not know how long they would be trapped in the cave. But Zara needed the food more than he did. Zara took the food reluctantly and ate it slowly. Jake could see that she was thinking about something. Her violet eyes kept looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. You want to know why I'm helping you, Jake said. I can see it in your eyes. Zara tilted her head to one side, the way she had done before. Jake realized this was a Lyrian gesture that meant she was listening carefully. Jake pointed to himself and then made a gesture, like he was eating. Then he shook his head and pointed to Zara. He was trying to show her that he was not going to eat her. Zara understood what Jake was trying to say. She looked surprised, as if this idea had never occurred to her before. Jake tried to think of a way to communicate more complex ideas. He picked up a small piece of crystal from the floor and held it up. Then he pretended to throw it away and shook his head. I don't hurt things that don't need to be hurt, Jake said, knowing she could not understand the words. But hoping she would understand the meaning, Zara watched Jake's gestures carefully. She seemed to be trying to process this new information. Everything Jake was doing contradicted what she had been taught about humans. Jake decided to try a different approach. He pulled out his communicator and showed Zara a picture of his family that he kept on the device. It was an old photo of him with his parents and his younger sister back on Earth. Family, Jake said, pointing to the people in the picture. My family. Zara looked at the picture with great interest. She could see that the people in the photo were happy and smiling. They looked peaceful and kind, not like the savage monsters she had been told about. Zara pointed to Jake's sister in the picture and said something in her language. Jake thought she was asking if the girl was his sister. "Yes," Jake said, nodding. "My sister. Her name is Amy." Zara studied the picture more closely. She seemed fascinated by the idea that humans had families just like Lyrians did. Jake showed Zara how to work the communicator and let her look through more pictures. There were photos of his hometown, his friends from the Marines, and even his old dog from when he was a kid. Zara's eyes grew wide as she looked at each picture. She was seeing humans in a completely different way than she had before. These were not monsters, but people with lives and relationships and feelings. "We're not so different," Jake said softly. "We all have families. We all want to be safe and happy." Zara looked up at Jake and said something in her language. Her voice was still musical, but it sounded less frightened than before. Jake wished he could understand what she was saying. He decided to try to learn some basic words in her language. He pointed to himself and said, "Jake," clearly. Then he pointed to her and waited. "Zara," she said, understanding what he wanted. Jake repeated her name carefully, trying to match the musical tone of her voice. Zara smiled when she heard him say it correctly. Next, Jake pointed to the water bottle and waited. Zara said something that sounded like Kella. Jake repeated the word, and Zara nodded approvingly. They continued this language lesson for several minutes. Jake learned words for food, water, light, and safe. Zara seemed to enjoy teaching him, and she was patient when he pronounced words incorrectly. "Kella," Jake said, pointing to the water bottle. "Yes," Zara replied in accented but clear English. "Water." Jake was surprised that Zara knew some English words. He realized that her people might have learned human language from traders or other contacts. "You speak English," Jake said slowly and clearly. "Little," Zara replied, holding up her fingers to show a small amount. "Learn from ... traders. This was a breakthrough. Now they could communicate more easily, even if Zara's vocabulary was limited." "Why? Were you alone?" Jake asked. "Where is your family?" Zara's face became sad, and she pointed toward the cave entrance. "Battle," she said. "Family ... gone." Jake felt a wave of sadness for the young girl. She had lost her family in the fighting, and now she was completely alone in a dangerous place. "I'm sorry," Jake said gently. "I will help you find them." Zara looked at Jake with hope in her violet eyes. "You help? Really?" "Yes," Jake said firmly. "I promise." Zara reached out and touched Jake's hand. Her touch was warm and trusting, completely different from the terrified contact she had made earlier. "You ... good human," Zara said slowly. "Not like stories." "What stories?" Jake asked. Zara struggled to find the English words. "Vex tell ... humans eat other people. Humans bad. Humans monsters." Jake felt angry that the Vex had filled this innocent child's mind with such terrible lies. No wonder she had been so frightened when she first saw him. "The Vex lied to you," Jake said. "Humans don't eat other people. We protect people, especially children." Zara nodded slowly. "I see now. You protect me. You give food. You ... kind." Jake smiled at her. "That's right. We help each other." Suddenly, Jake heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was the scraping of claws on stone, which meant Khazari soldiers were approaching. The Khazari were even more dangerous than the Vex because they were faster and harder to detect. Jake quickly put away the communicator and picked up his rifle. Zara saw his reaction and immediately became alert. "What?" she whispered. "Khazari," Jake whispered back. "Very dangerous. We need to hide." Zara nodded and pressed herself against the back wall of the chamber. Jake moved to the entrance and listened carefully. The scraping sounds were getting closer. Jake's hands started to shake as he gripped his rifle. He had been in many battles, but he had never felt pressure like this before. It was not just his own life at stake now. He had to protect Zara too. The scraping sound stopped right outside their hiding place. Jake held his breath and waited. He could hear the Khazari soldiers talking in their hissing language. One of the Khazari said something that sounded like a question. Another one answered, and Jake heard them moving away from the chamber. Jake waited several more minutes before relaxing. The Khazari had not found them, but they were still in the area. It was not safe to leave the chamber yet. "They're gone," Jake whispered to Zara, "but we need to be very quiet." Zara nodded and moved closer to Jake. She was no longer afraid of him. Instead, she was seeking his protection. Jake put his arm around Zara's shoulders and pulled her close. She was small and fragile, but she was also brave and smart. He was determined to keep her safe. "We're going to get out of here," Jake said softly. "I promise." Zara looked up at him with trust in her violet eyes. "I believe you," she said. Jake led the small alien child deeper into the cave system, her furry hand gripping his fingers tightly. The sounds of battle grew louder behind them, and Jake could hear the distinctive clicking language of Vex warriors getting closer. He needed to find shelter quickly. The child moved slowly because of her injuries, but she tried her best to keep up with Jake's pace. Every few steps, she would look back over her shoulder with fear in her violet eyes. Jake squeezed her hand gently to reassure her. "It's okay," Jake whispered. "We're going to find somewhere safe." The child looked up at him and said something in her musical language. Jake wished he could understand her, but the tone was clear enough. She was scared and confused. They moved through a narrow passage where the blue crystal walls seemed to glow brighter. Jake had never seen anything like these caves before. The crystals created patterns of light that danced on the walls, making everything look like it was underwater. The sound of plasma fire echoed from somewhere behind him. Jake's unit was still fighting, but he could not help them while protecting the child. His duty as a soldier was to follow orders, but his duty as a human being was to protect the innocent. Jake found a small chamber that branched off from the main passage. It was barely large enough for two people, but it was hidden from view. He led the child inside and helped her sit down on a flat piece of crystal that formed a natural bench. "Stay here," Jake said, making a gesture with his hand that he hoped she would understand. "I'm going to make sure we're safe." The child nodded and pulled her knees up to her chest. She looked so small and vulnerable in the dim light of the cave. Jake felt a strong urge to protect her, the same feeling he had when he saw injured animals back on his family's farm in Ohio. Jake crept back to the entrance of the chamber and listened carefully. The sounds of battle were moving away from them, but he could still hear Vex warriors searching the caves. Their clicking voices seemed to be coming from multiple directions. When Jake returned to the child, he found her examining the bandages he had put on her wounds. She touched them gently and then looked at him with those large violet eyes. She said something in her language that sounded like a question. "You want to know why I helped you," Jake said, sitting down across from her. "Because you needed help. That's what people do for each other." The child tilted her head to one side, like a curious animal. Jake realized she was trying to understand not just his words, but his actions. Everything he was doing went against what she had been taught about humans. Jake pulled out his water bottle and offered it to her. The child stared at it for a long moment before taking it with both hands. She sniffed the water carefully before taking a small sip. Then she handed it back to Jake with a shy smile. "You're thirsty," Jake said. "Drink more." The child shook her head and pushed the bottle back toward Jake. She was trying to share with him, even though she was the one who needed it more. Jake was impressed by her thoughtfulness. "You keep it," Jake said, pushing the bottle back to her. "I have more." This was not entirely true. Jake only had one water bottle, and his supplies were limited. But the child needed water more than he did. She was smaller and had lost blood from her injuries. The child drank more water and then tried to get the bottle back again. Jake smiled and shook his head. She seemed to understand that he wanted her to keep it. Jake opened his pack and pulled out a nutrition bar. It was not very tasty, but it would give her energy. He broke off a piece and offered it to her. The child looked at the food suspiciously. Jake realized that she might not know what it was, or she might be afraid that it was poison. He took a bite of the nutrition bar himself and chewed it slowly to show her it was safe. "It's food," Jake said. "It will help you feel better." The child watched Jake eat and then carefully took the piece he offered her. She nibbled on it like a small animal, testing the taste. Her face showed surprise, as if she had expected it to taste terrible. "Not bad, right?" Jake said. "I know it's not much, but it's better than nothing." The child ate the rest of the nutrition bar slowly. Jake could see that she was still hungry, so he gave her another piece. She tried to refuse it, but Jake insisted. The child ate. Jake studied her features more carefully. Her fur was soft and gray, like a rabbit's, but her face was more human-like than he had first thought. Her ears were long and pointed, and they moved slightly when she heard sounds. Her eyes were large and violet, with long eyelashes that made her look innocent and young. Jake guessed that she was about 10 years old in human terms, but he had no way of knowing for sure. Different species aged at different rates, and he had. Never met a Lyrian before. The child finished eating and looked around the small chamber. She seemed to be evaluating their hiding place, checking for exits and possible dangers. Jake was impressed by her awareness. Even though she was young and scared, she was thinking about survival. "You're a smart kid," Jake said. "What's your name?" The child looked at him with confusion. Jake pointed to himself and said, "Jake." Then he pointed to her and raised his eyebrows in a question. The child understood. She pointed to herself and said something that sounded like Zara. Her voice was soft and musical, like all Lyrian voices. "Zara," Jake repeated. "That's a pretty name." Zara smiled slightly when she heard Jake say her name. It was the first time she had smiled since he found her, and it made her whole face light up. Jake took off his jacket and offered it to Zara. The cave was cold, and she was shivering. She looked at the jacket with confusion, not understanding what Jake wanted her to do with it. Jake mimed putting on the jacket and then pointed to her. Zara understood and let Jake help her put it on. The jacket was much too big for her, but it was warm and it smelled like safety. "Better?" Jake asked. Zara nodded and pulled the jacket tighter around herself. She said something in her language that Jake thought might be, "Thank you." The sound of plasma fire got closer again, and Jake heard Vex warriors calling to each other. They were still searching the caves, and they were getting closer to the chamber where Jake and Zara were hiding. Jake picked up his rifle and moved to the entrance of the chamber. He could see lights moving in the main passage, and he could hear the clicking language of the Vex clearly now. There were at least 3 of them, maybe more. Zara seemed to sense the danger. She pressed herself against the back wall of the chamber and tried to make herself as small as possible. Jake could see the fear returning to her eyes. "Stay quiet," Jake whispered. "They'll go away soon." The lights got brighter, and Jake could hear the heavy footsteps of Vex warriors right outside their hiding place. He held his breath and gripped his rifle tighter. One of the Vex warriors said something in their clicking language, and the lights stopped moving. Jake's heart pounded as he realized they had found the entrance to the chamber. Zara looked at Jake with wide eyes. She was terrified, but she was trying to be brave. Jake gave her a reassuring look and put his finger to his lips. The lights began to move again, and the sounds of the Vex warriors grew fainter. They had not found the chamber after all. Jake waited several more minutes before relaxing. "They're gone," Jake whispered to Zara. "We're safe for now." Zara let out a long breath and slumped against the wall. The stress of hiding had exhausted her, and Jake could see that she was fighting to stay awake. "You should rest," Jake said. "I'll keep watch." Zara shook her head and tried to stay alert, but her eyes were closing. Jake moved closer to her and gently guided her head to rest on his shoulder. "It's okay," Jake said softly. "You're safe now." I won't let anything happen to you. Zara looked up at Jake one more time before closing her eyes. For the first time since he found her, she looked peaceful. Jake sat still and let her sleep, keeping his rifle ready and his ears open for any sign of danger. As he watched over the sleeping child, Jake thought about what he was doing. He was supposed to be fighting a war, but instead he was protecting an alien child who had been taught to fear him. It was not what he had planned, but it felt right. The battle outside continued. But Jake had found something more important than victory. He had found someone who needed his help, and he was not going to let her down. The ground shook under Jake Martinez's boots as another plasma blast hit the cave wall behind him. Dust and small rocks fell from the ceiling, and the air tasted like burned metal. He pressed his back against the cold stone wall and checked his rifle. Only 2 energy cells left. This was not going well. The moon of Kepler 442b was supposed to be an easy mission. Intel said it was just a simple mining operation with light resistance. Intel was wrong. The Vex Empire had set up a major base here, in the Khazari Republic, was fighting them for control. Now Jake and his unit were caught in the middle of a 3-way war. Martinez, fall back to position 7, came the crackling voice in his earpiece. Sergeant First Class Jake Martinez had been in the Colonial Marines for 8 years, but he had never seen a battle this messy. The enemy forces were everywhere, and his unit was scattered across the crystalline cave system. Jake moved carefully through the narrow passage. The walls here were made of some kind of blue crystal that glowed softly in the darkness. It was beautiful, but right now beauty was the last thing on his mind. He needed to find his squad and get out of here alive. A loud explosion echoed through the caves, much closer this time. Jake dropped to one knee and raised his rifle. The sound of running feet came from ahead, but he could not tell if they were human, Vex, or Khazari. All 3 species sounded different when they moved, and Jake had learned to tell them apart during his years of service. These footsteps were light and quick, not the heavy thud of Vex warriors or the scraping claws of Khazari soldiers. Jake relaxed slightly, thinking it might be one of his fellow Marines. But as the steps got closer, he realized they were too light even for a human. A small figure stumbled around the corner and crashed into a pile of fallen rocks. Jake's training took over, and he aimed his rifle at the newcomer. But what he saw made him lower his weapon in confusion. It was a child. A small alien child with soft gray fur and large violet eyes. She was about the size of a human 10-year-old, but her features were different. Her ears were long and pointed, like a rabbit's, and her face was more rounded than a human's. She wore a simple blue dress that was torn and dirty. The child saw Jake and froze. Her violet eyes grew even wider, and she began to shake. Jake noticed dark stains on her dress that looked like blood. She was injured. "Hey there, little one," Jake said softly, keeping his rifle lowered. "Are you hurt?" The child did not answer. She just stared at him with those huge eyes, and Jake could see pure terror in them. She was more afraid of him than of the battle raging around them. Jake had seen this look before. It was the same look he had seen on the faces of human children during raids on pirate bases. It was the look of someone who expected to die. The child slowly backed away from Jake, pressing herself against the cave wall. She whispered something in a language Jake did not understand. It sounded like singing, but sad and frightened. "I'm not going to hurt you," Jake said, setting his rifle down on the ground. "I want to help." The child's eyes fixed on Jake's uniform. She seemed to recognize it, and her fear grew even stronger. She whispered again in her musical language, and this time Jake thought he heard the word human mixed in with the alien sounds. Jake looked down at his uniform. The patch on his shoulder clearly marked him as a member of the human Colonial Marines. Whatever this child's species was, they obviously knew about humans. And from her reaction, what they knew was not good. "Look, I know you can't understand." "Me," Jake said, "but I'm not the bad guy here." The child pointed at Jake with a trembling finger and spoke more of her musical language. Jake caught a few words that sounded familiar. He had heard them before during first contact training. This was a Lyrian child. The Lyrians were a peaceful species that lived on the outer rim of known space. They rarely got involved in galactic politics and preferred to trade rather than fight. Jake remembered learning that they were herbivores, who lived in family groups and had a complex social structure. Based on music and storytelling, he also remembered something else about the Lyrians. They were terrified of humans, not because humans had ever attacked them, but because of propaganda spread by the Vex Empire. The Vex told other species that humans were savage consumers who ate other sentient beings alive. Jake looked at the frightened child and realized what she was thinking. In her mind, he was a monster who was about to eat her. "Oh no," Jake whispered. "You think I'm going to hurt you." The child nodded slowly, tears running down her furry cheeks. She said something else in her language, and Jake heard what sounded like a prayer. Jake's heart broke. This little girl was injured and alone, surrounded by a war zone, and she thought the person who found her was going to eat her alive. He had to do something. Moving very slowly, Jake reached into his medical kit and pulled out a bandage. The child's eyes followed his every movement, but she did not run. Maybe she was too scared, or maybe she was too hurt to move. "I'm going to help you," Jake said in the calmest voice he could manage. "I'm going to fix your cuts." The child looked at the bandage in Jake's hand and then at his face. She seemed confused. This was not what she expected from a human monster. Jake pointed to a cut on the child's leg and then to the bandage. He mimed wrapping it around his own arm to show her what he wanted to do. The child watched him with those large violet eyes, and Jake could see her trying to understand. Another explosion shook the cave, closer than before. Jake heard the sound of Vex warriors calling to each other in their clicking language. They were getting closer. "We need to get out of here," Jake said to the child. "I know you don't trust me, but those Vex soldiers will hurt both of us if they find us." The child looked toward the sound of the approaching Vex forces and then back at Jake. She seemed to be weighing her options. Stay here and face the Vex, or trust the human who was supposed to eat her. Jake held out his hand to her. "I won't hurt you, I promise." The child stared at his hand for a long moment. Then very slowly, she reached out and touched his fingers with her small furry hand. Her touch was warm and soft, like a rabbit's. "That's it," Jake said. "I'm going to take care of you." The child let Jake examine her injuries. She had several cuts on her legs and arms, and bruises on her face. None of the wounds looked life-threatening, but they needed to be cleaned and bandaged. Jake worked quickly and carefully. Every time he touched her, the child flinched, but she did not pull away. She watched his face the whole time, as if she was trying to figure out what kind of monster he was. "There," Jake said when he finished. "All better." The child looked down at her bandaged wounds and then back at Jake. She said something in her language that sounded like a question. "You're wondering why I helped you," Jake said. "Because that's what we do. We help people who need help." The sound of Vex warriors was getting closer. Jake picked up his rifle and listened carefully. There were at least 6 of them, maybe more. Too many to fight with only 2 energy cells. The child was still watching Jake's face. She seemed less afraid now, but still very confused. In her mind, humans were supposed to be evil creatures who devoured other species. But this human had bandaged her wounds and spoken to her gently. "Come on," Jake said, holding out his hand. Again, "We need to find somewhere safe to hide." This time, the child took his hand without hesitation.